These are 5 boat categories that meet the standards regulators are already implementing, while traditional powerboats face mounting pressure from emissions rules. The same environmental push that eliminated two-stroke dirt bikes and transformed diesel trucks is now reshaping the marine industry, and the timeline is shorter than most people think. What technology separates compliant boats from those facing restrictions, and why are some manufacturers investing billions while others hope the regulations go away? Keep watching, because the answer determines what you can legally operate in the next decade. Understanding what's actually changing in marine regulations matters before we look at specific boats, because the shift explains why certain vessels are positioned to handle the new rules while others aren't. Recreational boat regulations are moving in the same direction that transformed road vehicles over the past few decades. Emissions standards that once focused primarily on commercial shipping are expanding to include recreational vessels, particularly in areas with heavy boating activity, and coastal states plus regions with protected waterways are leading this change by implementing restrictions that other areas will likely follow. This isn't speculation or distant future planning, and multiple jurisdictions have already begun phasing in requirements that affect what boats can operate in certain waters, what fuel systems are acceptable, and what emissions levels pass inspection. The pattern mirrors automotive regulations. Start with the most populated areas, prove the technology works, then expand the requirements. So what makes a boat future-proof in this environment? 3 main factors determine survival: propulsion system, emissions output, and adaptability to changing fuel standards. The boats that check these boxes aren't necessarily the most expensive or the most technologically complex, but they share common characteristics that position them for long-term viability. Let's break down the 5 categories best positioned for the regulatory environment ahead. Electric boats represent the most straightforward path to regulatory compliance because they eliminate tailpipe emissions entirely, and the technology has matured from experimental concepts to production models that deliver genuine performance over the past several years. The advantage of electric propulsion goes beyond just meeting current regulations, because as standards tighten, electric boats don't need modification or upgrades since they already exceed even the strictest proposed emissions requirements. This makes them regulatory-proof in a way that no combustion engine can match. Battery technology has improved substantially in modern electric boats, addressing the range anxiety that plagued early models, and charging infrastructure at marinas has expanded in regions with heavy boating populations. The operational range now works for the majority of recreational boating use cases, particularly day trips and shorter excursions, while performance characteristics appeal to boaters beyond the environmental benefits. Electric motors deliver instant torque, run silently, and require far less maintenance than traditional engines. No oil changes, no winterization of fuel systems, no engine tune-ups whatsoever. The simplicity translates to lower long-term operating costs despite higher upfront purchase prices. Several manufacturers have committed to electric-only lineups for certain boat categories, recognizing where the regulatory trend is headed, and these aren't experimental side projects anymore, but core product lines backed by major marine companies with decades of manufacturing experience. Marinas in regulation-focused regions are installing charging stations at slips, and some newer developments are building electrical capacity into their initial design rather than retrofitting after the fact. The timeline for widespread charging availability aligns closely with the timeline for stricter emissions requirements, which means the infrastructure question, while valid, is improving rapidly. Range limitations remain the primary drawback for long-distance cruising and offshore applications, which still favor traditional propulsion, but for inland lakes, coastal day trips, and marina-based boating, electric propulsion handles the majority of actual use patterns. And that's the key. Battery energy density continues improving, which means even those limitations are shrinking. 4-stroke outboard technology represents the gasoline-powered option most likely to remain compliant as regulations tighten, and the engineering that went into modern 4-strokes was driven specifically by emissions requirements that eliminated 2-stroke engines from many applications. How 4-stroke engines operate fundamentally differs from older designs, which means they produce substantially lower emissions than 2-stroke power. Complete combustion cycles, closed crankcase systems, and sophisticated fuel injection result in cleaner exhaust and dramatically reduced hydrocarbon discharge into the water. Major outboard manufacturers have invested heavily in 4-stroke technology precisely because they see the regulatory writing on the wall, and the newest generation incorporates technology borrowed from automotive applications like computer-controlled fuel injection, variable valve timing, and emissions monitoring systems that would have been unthinkable on marine engines 20 years ago. Fuel efficiency represents another advantage that aligns with regulatory goals, because 4-stroke outboards burn far less fuel than comparable 2-strokes, which directly translates to lower emissions output. This efficiency also means reduced operating costs and extended range, benefits that matter to boat owners regardless of regulatory pressure. Reliability and longevity of modern four-strokes have improved to the point where they match or exceed traditional two-stroke durability, and while early four-stroke outboards had a reputation for being heavier and less responsive, current designs have narrowed those gaps considerably. The performance difference that once favored two strokes has largely disappeared. Maintenance requirements for four-stroke outboards are more complex than two strokes, requiring oil changes and valve adjustments that simpler engines don't need, but this increased maintenance is offset by better reliability and compliance with emissions standards that keep the boats legal to operate. And here's the thing, the used boat market is already reflecting this shift. Boats equipped with modern four-stroke outboards hold their value better than equivalent models with older two-stroke power because buyers recognize that regulations limiting where two strokes can operate will only expand, making four-stroke equipped boats a safer long-term investment. Diesel power isn't going away, but the diesel engines that survive the regulatory shift will look fundamentally different from the workhorses that powered boats for decades. Modern marine diesel engines with comprehensive emissions controls represent the future of diesel boating, and the technology that cleaned up diesel trucks and commercial vehicles has migrated to marine applications. Selective catalytic reduction, diesel particulate filters, and exhaust gas recirculation systems are now appearing on recreational boat diesel engines, delivering emissions performance that meets increasingly strict standards. Diesel's inherent efficiency advantage means these engines produce lower carbon dioxide emissions per unit of power compared to gasoline alternatives, and as regulations focus not just on local air quality but also on greenhouse gas emissions, this efficiency becomes increasingly valuable. The durability and longevity that made diesel engines popular for serious cruising boats remain intact even with emissions controls added, because modern marine diesels are designed to run these systems reliably in the harsh marine environment, addressing early concerns about complexity and failure points. Fuel availability also favors diesel for certain applications, since marinas catering to larger cruising boats already have diesel infrastructure in place, and that's not changing. For boats that need extended range and serious power, diesel with modern emissions controls remains the most practical option. The added complexity does mean higher purchase prices and more sophisticated maintenance requirements, and emission systems need proper care and occasional service, while the technology requires operators to use proper fuel and operating procedures. But for boats where diesel makes sense, these systems are the price of admission for future regulatory compliance, and manufacturers of larger cruising boats and trawlers have embraced them because their customers expect multi-decade service lives from their vessels. Building in compliance with future regulations protects that investment and ensures these boats can operate wherever their owners want to go. Sailboats occupy a unique position in the regulatory landscape because their primary propulsion produces zero emissions, and even when regulations tighten on motorized vessels, sailboats with clean auxiliary engines face minimal restrictions. Auxiliary engines on modern cruising sailboats increasingly use the same four-stroke or diesel technology that makes powerboats compliant, and since these engines run far fewer hours than powerboat engines, their total emissions impact is minimal, making them easy targets for regulatory approval even under strict standards. Electric auxiliary propulsion on sailboats has gained traction because the power requirements are modest compared to powerboats, since a sailboat only needs its engine for maneuvering in harbors, dealing with calm conditions, and charging systems. This limited duty cycle makes battery-powered auxiliary systems practical even with current battery technology, and solar plus wind charging systems can extend or even eliminate the need for engine running time, which means some cruising sailboats now operate essentially emission-free by combining electric auxiliary propulsion with renewable charging systems. The regulatory advantage of sailboats goes beyond just emissions because many jurisdictions recognize sailing as a traditional and environmentally conscious form of boating, making regulations less likely to target properly equipped sailboats even as they tighten restrictions on pure powerboats. Performance under sail has also improved with modern hull designs and rig configurations, which means sailboats don't sacrifice capability to gain regulatory advantages, but deliver genuine sailing performance while offering auxiliary power that meets the strictest standards. Builders are standardizing on electric or modern diesel auxiliary systems because they know these boats need to remain compliant throughout their service lives, and the market for new cruising sailboats reflects this reality. The days of simple old technology diesel auxiliaries are ending, replaced by systems designed for a regulated future. Hybrid marine propulsion combines different power sources to optimize both performance and emissions, borrowing concepts from automotive hybrids but adapting them for marine applications, and these systems represent sophisticated approaches to meeting regulatory requirements while maintaining the capability boaters expect. The typical marine hybrid uses an electric motor for low-speed operation and harbor maneuvering, then switches to efficient diesel power for cruising, which matches the duty cycle of many boats perfectly, since it means slow speeds in congested or environmentally sensitive areas where emissions matter most, then efficient cruising when in open water. Battery capacity in hybrid systems can handle the electric-only operation that some restricted waterways may eventually require, and even if regulations don't mandate pure electric operation, the ability to switch to zero-emission mode positions hybrid boats favorably for future rules. Regeneration capabilities in some hybrid systems capture energy that would otherwise be wasted, improving overall efficiency, and this might come from regenerative propulsion during sailing on hybrid sailboats or from generator operation optimized to charge batteries while producing power for hotel loads. Complexity represents the main drawback of hybrid systems, because more components mean more potential failure points and higher maintenance requirements, but manufacturers designing marine hybrids have learned from decades of automotive hybrid development, incorporating reliability improvements that address early concerns. Cost represents another barrier to hybrid adoption, since these systems carry premium prices that limit them primarily to larger boats where the expense can be justified, but as production volumes increase and technology matures, hybrid options are expanding into smaller boat categories. Environmental benefits go beyond just emissions compliance, and hybrid systems typically reduce fuel consumption significantly compared to conventional propulsion, lowering both operating costs and environmental impact. This dual benefit appeals to boat owners regardless of their primary motivation, while the sophistication of modern marine hybrids allows operators to optimize their system usage based on conditions. Want maximum range? Run in diesel mode. Need quiet operation for wildlife watching? Switch to electric. Entering a restricted area? Go pure electric. This flexibility future-proofs the boat for regulatory scenarios that haven't even been written yet. The shift toward regulated marine emissions isn't happening overnight, but the direction is clear and the timeline is compressing faster than most people realize. Boat owners making purchase decisions today need to consider not just what regulations exist now, but what requirements their boat will face over its service life, because boats represent investments that owners expect to last decades. A boat that becomes restricted from operating in desirable areas or faces expensive modifications to remain compliant loses value and utility, which is why future-proofing means choosing propulsion technology that will remain welcome wherever you want to boat. The used boat market will increasingly reflect these regulatory realities, and boats with compliant propulsion systems will hold value better and find buyers more easily than those facing restrictions. This is already visible in regions with tighter emissions rules, where two-stroke powered boats sell at discounts compared to four-stroke equivalents, and the gap is widening. New boat purchases offer the opportunity to choose compliance from the start and the incremental cost of future-proof. Propulsion technology is substantially lower when built into a new boat than trying to retrofit or replace systems on an existing vessel. Making the right choice now prevents expensive problems later, while infrastructure development follows the regulatory timeline. Marinas in regions implementing tighter rules are installing charging stations and upgrading electrical systems to support electric and hybrid boats, which creates a positive feedback loop where better infrastructure makes compliant boats more practical, driving demand for more infrastructure. The performance gap between compliant and non-compliant boats continues shrinking as well, because early electric boats sacrificed range and performance for zero emissions, but modern designs deliver capability that matches conventional boats for most recreational use. Four-stroke and modern diesel technology has eliminated the performance advantages that once made older engines appealing despite their emissions, and manufacturers are making the choice easier by shifting their product lines toward compliant technology. The newest boat models increasingly come standard with propulsion systems designed for future regulations, making it harder to accidentally buy a boat that will face restrictions. The future of recreational boating includes stricter emissions regulations, following the same path that transformed automobiles over the past several decades, and 5 boat categories are positioned to handle this shift without requiring expensive modifications or facing operational restrictions. Electric boats eliminate emissions entirely, making them regulation-proof regardless of how strict standards become, while modern 4-stroke outboards deliver the efficiency and clean operation that keeps gasoline-powered boats compliant. Diesel engines with comprehensive emissions controls bring traditional diesel advantages into the regulated future. Sailboats with clean auxiliary power leverage their wind-driven primary. Propulsion, while meeting standards for motorized operation, and hybrid systems combine the benefits of multiple technologies to optimize both performance and compliance. The common thread connecting these future-proof boats is that they were designed from the start to meet stricter standards rather than being forced to adapt after the fact, because manufacturers building these boats recognized regulatory trends early and incorporated compliance into their fundamental engineering rather than treating it as an afterthought. Boat owners have time to make informed decisions, but that window is narrowing as regulations expand and tighten, and the boats that will still be legal and welcome on all waterways in 2035 are available today. They just require looking beyond traditional powerboat designs and considering propulsion technology through a regulatory lens, because the shift isn't about losing capability or giving up performance, it's about choosing boats engineered for the reality of increased environmental awareness, and the regulations that follow, and the 5 categories we've covered deliver everything recreational boaters need while positioning their owners for whatever regulatory changes the future brings. Whether you're shopping for your next boat or evaluating your current one, understanding these trends helps protect your investment and ensures you can keep boating wherever you want, regardless of how the rules evolve.